So happy to have you all here this evening. For those who just came in, you can look at the chat box for instructions on how to pick your language channel. My name is Jill Norcross. I'm with the Northern Virginia Housing Alliance. I'm here today joined by my colleagues Hannah Matuda and Alice Hogan, who has recently joined us through our merger with the Alliance for Housing Solutions. Our agenda this evening is to hear a presentation from Alice on general local budget advocacy tips. She has a great presentation to share with us. And then we've invited some of our community partners from each of the 5 local jurisdictions in Northern Virginia to come and give us an overview about the housing challenges they're seeing in their communities. The goal is really to encourage all of you to speak up during our local budget season. We know that we have challenges and our local governments have resources, and they need the encouragement from advocates to go ahead and commit more dollars to new housing production, to rental assistance, and to preservation of the units we already have. So we'll just kind of learn together. After we hear from our community partners, we will have the opportunity to have a little question and answer. Unfortunately, we don't have time to introduce everyone on the call, so I ask if you don't mind putting your name and affiliation in the chat so we can get to know each other that way. And I hope the interpretation feature is working for you. Please reach out if you are having any issues. And I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Alice Hogan. Welcome. Thank you, Alice.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Bienvenido. Thank you for being here. We'll just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about local advocacy tips and suggestions that may work in your community. All right, good. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about local budget advocacy. So I'm Alice Hogan. I was formerly with Alliance for Housing Solutions. We have merged with Navaja, and this is our second year doing this presentation. So hopefully you'll learn something and have much to share with the group too. So tonight we're going to talk about relationships and the importance of communication between advocates and decision makers. What are the to-dos, the things we want to be doing year-round, as well as in the budget season itself, tools and tips for how to go about advocating, and then what we do to follow up with folks. And then that's kind of an annual cycle that you sort of perfect and repeat as you go. And at the end, we'll have question and answer and a community conversation. So let's jump in. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is supporting or recommending a certain cause or issue or action on the behalf of yourself or others. So we're speaking up. We're talking about what we need and what others need, and we're elevating that to the decision makers and elected officials. So we talked about relationships a little bit. One of the things that we found helpful is to reach out and get to know other folks in the nonprofit or advocacy space and try to come together, building those relationships, learning from each other. What are the needs of your constituents or your group's members? And what can we find in common to work together in a joint advocacy effort? So tonight is an example. Folks here may hear from each other what we need in our different jurisdictions or within a jurisdiction and make those connections. And then as your own group or as this coalition, you want to meet with elected officials. And that's something you can be doing year round, but very especially when the budget season comes around. So you can have that face-to-face or online face-to-face about what you're interpreting the budget to mean, what those folks have for priority, and how you might be able to work together. Another important set of relationships is with staff and staff of the elected officials, and then your housing and planning and services staff in your community. Again, hearing from each other what they need, what's working, what's not, what you would like to see, what your constituents are saying they need. You know, if we see a lot of people struggling with evictions, then we need to bring that forward and say people can't pay their rent and they don't qualify for such and such program. What can we do as a community to support these folks to avoid homelessness, as an example? And then you want to partner up. A lot of our elected officials, they do want to do the right thing. So keeping them informed of what's going on and helping them make those good decisions in that partnership can really be helpful. So when we mentioned that it's kind of a year-round process, and this can vary in jurisdictions. So I mostly know Arlington. So how ours works is that in the falls, we just came through this process where the closeout funds, that's like any leftover money from last year that was not allocated, can be allocated in the fall, or it could be transferred into the new budget. And so that's an opportunity in the fall to actually have sort of a mini advocacy session where you're actually talking about that small pot of money and pointing out exactly what it could be used for. And sometimes you can get that little boost in a certain program's budget at those closeout times. It's also an opportunity to tell leaders, if you can't use it now, this is an ongoing need. Please consider it in your guidance and in your deliberations in the actual budget season. So later in the fall and early winter, you hear about the budget outlook. What was the income last year, right? And what are the expenses? So how much are they looking at being able to fund in the coming year, and the vast number of programs and departments that are vying for the same money. And then based on how much money they anticipate coming in revenue, sometimes they'll see it's really low and we have all these needs. We might consider raising our personal property tax rate. So what people are paying to bring up a little bit higher that revenue to then be able to fund all the priorities. So you're looking at those things and you're listening carefully to your council members or your board members about what are their priorities, how nervous or positive are they feeling about revenue. And then as winter comes in, direction about what the budget should look like. And then the budget office will be providing a draft budget back to those decision makers and out to us in the community to take a look at it. So then we start interpreting that budget and thinking about, is it meeting the needs of our constituents? Is there enough rental assistance? Did they address home ownership? What about preservation and new construction, right? That huge amount of money we need to build up our housing stock of housing per community. And so then you're going to these sessions where they're explaining the budget. You're meeting with your coalition members. What do you guys see? What do we see? How do we work together? You attend the hearings that your community offers for public testimony and commentary. And that's where you bring folks with those lived experiences to say, I'm working 2 jobs and I still can't pay my rent. Or I have never been able to buy a home. Is there something this community can do to support people looking to get into home ownership? So those kinds of things, you bring that testimony and you attend all those meetings and remind folks in the decision makers area what it is we need and what we see. And then we come through these hearings, and at that final vote, we see what the decision makers do. And hopefully they heard our voices, they understand the problems, and they commit some serious budget financing to the situation. And then when the budget is over, we're celebrating some things, hopefully, and maybe we didn't get everything we need. And then there's a period of follow-up. So you're going to regroup with your coalition and get together and talk about what worked, what didn't, celebrate what you got funded, talk about what did not get funded, and maybe figure out why. So you're already starting to kind of debrief on the old and prepare yourself for the next budget year of what worked, what didn't, what got funded, what didn't, anticipating that next set of needs. And as the summer comes in, that new year will begin and you start figuring out, have you met back with your leaders? Are you connecting with your coalition members so that when the fall comes, you're going to start hearing what is the outlook for next year in September, October, November, and when we do it all over again. So that's kind of maybe seasonal. And then ongoing, we do things like attend each other's events, support each other's efforts, really get on the ground and talk with people in your particular community or other organizations that are working with other subpopulations to really inform ourselves about the variety of needs, the different needs, the common needs, and you're preparing yourself with that knowledge of what will you need to present to decision makers in the fall. What kind of testimony can you ask of these other communities or of the members of your community? Can you get ready in the fall to speak at this? Can you get ready in February or spring? So gathering those people, remembering to get those voices and prepare people for that process. So like we said, these are some of the to-dos. You're learning that budget process. It's sort of an annual cycle that's going on. And you're listening carefully throughout the year when your elected officials speak and give, speeches or updates. In Arlington, we have in the new year, the very first session of the year, each elected official takes a few minutes to give their priorities. So those kind of events, you're there and you're listening. What are their priorities and how could you partner up with something you might have heard? Or if you're not hearing, then that's telling you, I need to connect more frequently with that person, or we need to bring our coalition to explain these needs to that person who really doesn't have housing, in our case, on their radar. And then you're attending these meetings and learning. At many of these meetings, they give a chance for testimony. So you speak to that issue, continue to bring up the needs of people in the community who cannot pay their rent, who are on the verge of eviction, who are looking for housing, and how everyone in our community contributes to our community. We don't want to lose people. We want everyone to be safely housed. And all through the year, we're coordinating with our allies, we're collecting those stories, and we're going back to the county or jurisdiction and finding out what are those main programs that the community is funding, and are they meeting the needs? Do they need to be shifted a bit? Do they need to be reinforced? Is this program no longer necessary and we'd rather see that money go somewhere else? You're sort of analyzing what is there and comparing it to the needs you're aware of. And then you're getting that information ready to share back to your elected officials about program effectiveness, or targeting your programs to what your dollars to the programs that are meeting those needs as things shift from year to year. So as we talked about, then during the budget season itself, it really heats up. So you have to pay a lot of attention and kind of know it's a crazy couple months sometimes, getting that information, coordinating with your allies, meeting with those decision makers, and preparing for all those meetings. So like we said, in that year around time, you're scanning the community. What do people need? In the fall, you're figuring out how much money do we anticipate? If it's a big shortfall, you kind of prepare yourself. Wow, we might not get the funding we need. How can we beg for the most we can get? Or if there's a very good year, you're there ready to suggest, why don't we double this funding? Or how about we, reinvest in our ownership program? Or are we really funding homelessness prevention enough? Here's a chance to add. So you're just kind of gauging with the revenue. You're touching base with your partners and looking for that united message. So not everything we want as our groups or individuals is exactly the same, but we have much in common. So figuring out how to unite ourselves for a larger coalition, a bigger voice, a bigger, diversity of voices, all asking for the same basic things, gives power to our voices and power to that message. So gathering those real life stories that back up that message. And then you take that in small meetings to these elected officials, and you take it when you're testifying or emailing those folks throughout these important months, which are usually January, February, March, even April of the calendar year. So what are some of the tools we use? In-person meetings, virtual meetings, and those can be the big ones or the one-on-ones, Zooms, other opportunities to connect with our leaders. Social media and email are excellent ways to keep reminding folks what is going on in the community and that we expect our leaders to meet the needs in the community. Letters to the editor, sometimes it can get in the paper or on an online blog. Some groups do press releases with data or reaction to your budget situation. In the past, we've done postcard campaigns so that you're sending something physical to these offices because so much is electronic now. Sometimes a letter or a postcard campaign can really catch the eye because they don't get that much mail anymore. So it can be something very different. And if they realize 50, 100, 200 showed up in their mailbox at your county headquarters, that can really impact. So you sort of think through what are the strategies or tools. And then you find out in your community what are the testimonial or speaking engagements that you and your partners can sign up for. Commission meetings, small meetings with your leaders, these public forums that happen. In Arlington, we have a hearing about the budget specifically, and then we separately have one about the tax rate. So this year, there is some talk that they might raise the tax rate. If they do that, we'd like them to dedicate that extra money to housing programs. And so it's very much in our interest to be both at the budget and tax rate hearings to promote those ideas at each of those meetings. Another tool people use when you go to a meeting, a larger meeting or a hearing where your group will be testifying, is to do something very visual. Maybe you have signs or posters or banner. Maybe people have shirts that are attached to your organization or have a simple message on them, or buttons like a bright orange button, or different things that you can do to visually catch the eye of your leaders and say, wow, this room is half full of people who are looking for housing funding. It's going to impact them. Oops. Let's see. And group events, we've had rallies and other things before, and you can invite folks to that, invite the press to that, all those kinds of things. And then the last one, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to move this little bar, but underneath this little bar is videos. So one thing that can be very effective is, it's hard for folks to come to meetings. It's hard to sign up, and it's you have to be a little courageous sometimes to be brave and stand in a public environment and speak. So sometimes filming a little 30-second blurb or video of a person giving their testimony or explaining why more funding would be helpful is something you can just email to your elected officials, or post online. So it's right immediate, it's with the person, they don't have to go anywhere, it can be on their schedule, and yet still that person's voice gets heard. So it's just another creative outlet. Okay. And these are some tips for how to advocate. One of the most important things I've found over the years is really to affirm first, because they hear a lot of complaints, a lot of begging. It's never enough because our situation is never resolved, right? We haven't gotten to a point where we have enough housing at the right prices in the right places. And until that time, we're still agitating. So sometimes it's very helpful to start with something positive. What are our communities and our leaders doing right? What are they funding? What are we grateful for? And maybe you bring a success story. This person got to be a first-time home buyer. They're the child of immigrants and now they own a condo. That's amazing, right? Or this family was about to be evicted. They got the emergency funding and they're stable in their home. So kind of showing that what they have done has worked and let's do more of it. So coming at it from a positive perspective can be really helpful in setting that groundwork from a positive perspective. And like we've talked about, including and elevating voices of the people who are living this experience, human faces, real stories. And sometimes it's the hard story and sometimes it's the success story. And like we said, we've talked about common ground with like people, organizations in your community, and also with your leaders. Some of our leaders really get it. And so you want to partner up with them and strategize with them. What do they think will work this cycle? Because they are working with their coworkers and all of them will vote. So those leaders who we are aligned with can help us with information or strategies or suggestions. And as we've said, examples of success. Okay. So like we talked about, it's really an annual cycle. So at the end of the spring, when things are very busy and there's a lot of work, a lot of meetings, encouraging folks to participate and show up. And that's a lot of organizing. We're tired. So we got to celebrate whatever victories come at the end of this budget cycle and turn around to those leaders and to the other folks in our coalition and thank each other and celebrate together of what went right and what we're excited for in the budget. And we mentioned the things that did not get funded to the degree that we needed or were overlooked this time. So you're circling back, having those debriefing sessions within your coalition and sometimes with certain or all of the who voted on these things to kind of say thank you and right, or we're very disappointed next year, we'd really like to see X, Y, and Z. And you're setting those short and long-term goals and then take a break. It's exhausting. And we have that little bit of a break once the budget is voted on and before it kind of gets going. Usually it's that fiscal year, July 1. So then, as we said in that seasonal slide, you're starting to figure out what is working, what is not during those coming months, and you're preparing right away for that new cycle that will start in the fall. And you're continuing this year-round monitoring, and you're keeping your coalition together, and you're checking in and reminding your elected officials, we're still here, our folks still need housing, and keeping that conversation within your coalition and the powers that be throughout the year. And so, yeah, you got this. Si se puede, right? Tú si puedes. I like this quote so much.
So, yes, you can.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed advocates can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And so we can celebrate our victories and toward additional funding and services for the most vulnerable among us. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll have our question and answer and our group discussion.
Thank you, Alice. That was excellent. We will be sharing Alice's slides after the presentation in both English and Spanish, so we hope you can refer back to them. Also in the chat, we have a local budget advocacy checklist. So this is just a one-pager so that you can kind of reference and keep in mind. And we have that in English and Spanish in the chat. We will also share this after the session. Alice, really appreciated all of your comments. Thank you. And just trying to set the stage framing for what has worked. I know you have done this for a long time. So we just have a few questions in the chat. Why don't we ask those and then we'll move to the section where we hear from a lot of our community and coalition partners who are on the ground doing this work in each of the jurisdictions. So question. So there was one that came up about the difference between affordable dwelling unit and a workforce dwelling unit. Do you have, Alice, anything you want to say about that?
Interesting, because jurisdictions define these units very differently. So in Arlington, we call what I think you all in other jurisdictions might say is an ADU, we call that a CAF, committed affordable unit. So it does depend on the source of income, right? I mean, the source of, of funding for that unit, right? If it's subsidized by the government, it gets these sort of titles, names, and then it also has to do with what level of income you have is the eligibility for that unit. So most subsidized units generally are at a 60% of AMI and lower. Sometimes it goes up to 80. And then if it's workforce housing, sometimes that's not really a defined term, right? It's some range between 80 and maybe even up to 120%. So it's a higher level versus those deeply affordable. So really affordable can be, generally it's 80 or 60 and below, and workforce is usually above that. I don't know if other jurisdictions, wherever you are, have different kind of categories. I don't know, Jill, if you want to speak to
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great definition. A lot of it does, when we talk about housing, we do talk a lot about the incomes of the people who are living there, the area median income at 60% AMI or 80% AMI and below. But, I like to, when I'm talking about the difference between affordable and workforce housing, I like to say that, affordable housing is workforce housing. People who are living in affordable housing are working. So I don't ever want to, give the impression that people are living, without having to pay rent. I mean, people you all know in your communities are working so hard, often multiple jobs to afford the rent. So I do also say often that, affordable housing is our workforce housing, and we just need more of it. But there are, as Alice mentioned, technicalities depending upon the jurisdiction around which levels those serve. So I know in Fairfax County, we have an affordable dwelling unit program. So we get units through inclusionary zoning. So we get units from market rate housing developers that include affordable units and also workforce dwelling units in their projects. It's a way to get mixed income communities. It's usually supposed to be at no cost to the developer because they're able to build more units on the site, so have more density and include those affordable or workforce dwelling units. And they can also be either for sale units or rental units. So it does get complicated with the acronyms and programs, but happy to talk more offline. Another question, Alice, about the best ways to engage people with lived experiences of housing fragility or the plight of homelessness, and how do you build their perspectives into our organization and leadership and, their ability to share their own stories, if you have any thoughts about how
Yeah, it's tricky sometimes, right? You have privacy issues. A lot of things are going on and people are busy. There's language barriers, cultural barriers to stepping forth in front of, elected officials in what feels like a power situation. So there are a lot of things that make it tricky. You all know, right? We're all working with people. It's hard. And so that's where I mentioned even the video or helping someone write an email, like something that's maybe sometimes walking up to that podium. Maybe you're a second language learner, or maybe you've never participated before. It can be overwhelming. So I think, working with partners on the ground when you have a trusted relationship with someone who's going to guide you through that process, that to me is the best way. So maybe there's a provider who does work with people who are homeless or formerly homeless, who have a success story, and they might, you could tap into that person and say, would you be willing to do this? If I walk this walk with you and help you in the format that works for you, we can write a note, we can write a postcard, we could meet with people, we could have a Zoom call, we could help you stand up at the podium on a hearing, we could film you giving a 10 or 15 20-second blurb that we will send to someone. So trying to find what avenue works for that person, and trying to be either you're in relationship with that person, or to tap into community groups that are in relation with those people, to bring a trusted person with them, or if you're not that person. But it is definitely an ongoing struggle. So yeah, there may be, others on the call. We could open it up during the next section to ask we have a representative from each community, and then all others on the call, what are some strategies that you all have used to welcome people into this space who might not otherwise be there or might not feel comfortable?
Thank you. Another question, a comment really, which I think is important, that Rain Woos shared, that Virginia Housing, which is our state housing finance agency, has really excellent first-time home buyer seminars, and many lenders also offer these, and there are grants for first-time home buyers. So if you are interested in home ownership and affordable home ownership, the Virginia Housing just increased the maximum sales price that you can use some of their programs for, because they recognize in Northern Virginia the sales prices are high, and also some of the income limits to kind of better have more people be able to take advantage of these really excellent programs. I would recommend those in the chat of just signing up with one of those classes and doing the seminars. You have to go ahead and take the training in order to be able to use the resources, but you really do. I've taken the training, and you really do learn a lot about home ownership and how you can combine many different levels of resources to bring down that initial housing cost. So thank you for pointing that out. Another question in the chat. What are the best resources to find data to illustrate the severity of need, the people on waiting lists, people behind on rent, versus the amount of new ADUs being built? There's lots of anecdotal evidence that there isn't nearly enough affordable housing being built, but it's hard to figure out how to prove that. We're not building enough to meet the need. And then what are the best ways to incentivize increased building of more affordable units?
Yeah.
So yeah, Annie, I don't know, Alice, you want to take the first one about if you know, or Hannah, I know, does a lot of our research and policy for us, if there's websites or other resources to check.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
Hannah, do you want to do that?
yeah, I can definitely share some. So it just really depends. There are jurisdictions that are doing really great job at gathering data. I know Arlington has a housing dashboard that's really amazing, and you can get a lot of information from there. Unfortunately, other jurisdictions don't have that resource yet. Fingers crossed that they will get one eventually. But there are also other great resources like Housing Forward Virginia. ULI does amazing research, but when it comes to local level, it just really depends on the jurisdiction. And obviously, census data. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we could add to that the COG, right? The
Mm.
Metropolitan Council of Governments really does a great job tracking these things. They have reports every couple years. That's a source. And then the Fuller Institute at George Mason, sometimes that it depends on what projects they're working on, but they've offered good data in the past. It
Yeah.
is tricky because every jurisdiction has its own, but there should be some annual reports. Arlington has annual reports on their website too. So I guess you've got to dig in at your county level of what they're providing. So
And one more, I also would recommend visiting our partner HAND. It's
yes.
handhousing.org, and they have the housing indicator tool. So they're tracking the progress of each jurisdiction's housing goals. Each of our jurisdictions have set goals, most of them, some way or another, many of them aligned with the Washington Council of Government, but they're tracking amazing data. So I'd recommend that. We can make sure you get the links to that tool. They're going to release their, I think, third version update. They update it annually, is coming out next month. So want to highlight that for you. So we'll try to put together a resource list that we can share with you all, because I do think data is very important. It makes a very strong, clear argument in addition to the storytelling that we hope you all feel comfortable doing. And then just circling back on the best ways to incentivize increased building of more affordable units. Yeah, we know there are really significant barriers to having affordable housing built from kind of a land use and zoning entitlement process. There are a lot of fees and processes that slow this down. Additionally, it's very complicated housing finance development system that we have. A lot of our rental housing is built with a federal program, which is the low income housing tax credit. And that application opens once a year and it's competitive. So we do have some structural barriers to how these projects get developed, but again, happy to kind of talk more offline. And Navaja with HS are really trying to educate our advocates through our lunch and learns that we offer monthly. And we have recordings of some recent discussions on housing finance, which was really helpful with our partners from AHC. Okay, so do you have any suggestions about framing when advocating for higher taxes, which is generally very unpopular? Yes, very true. Hard to advocate for raising the tax rate, but that's really where a lot of additional resources come from. Alice, do you have any thoughts?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? I guess I would say, every jurisdiction is different. Of course, you have to kind of take the temperature. And sometimes there's like a wave happening and you kind of get on that wave. So for us here in Arlington, they are discussing it for the first time in a few years. And I think it's coming out of COVID. A lot of those extra funds that the government is providing are drying up. People are looking back and seeing that those funds did so much. That's what we needed, right? We needed additional rental subsidy that was like much broad, open and available, less, fewer requirements and access, and people were housed, right? So we kind of have to repeat what we saw and reflect back to folks, this was working and now the money is going away. Do we just go back? Or do we figure out now within our communities how to sustain, because it working, right? So you have some justification sometimes, and then sometimes you gotta, it's keeping your ear to the ground about politics in your community. So in our community, at least one of our leaders was already talking about this in the fall, and you could hear some bubbling about it. So I was like, okay, there's talking about this. Maybe if we can get enough people together, we can start that positive momentum, and maybe it can be something. So you sort of figure out the politics. And then another thing that works too, I think, is you compare to your other jurisdictions. You know, you see, when have other jurisdictions raised their tax rate and by how much? How you compare to your other jurisdictions, and sometimes you can kind of play that off. For example, Arlington, we haven't raised it in a while, and it's pretty low compared to other places. So it's kind of like, well, theirs is up, why can't we? You know, that kind of thing. And if yours is at the top and of our, you know, Northern Virginia area, that's not going to work. You're going to figure out another tact, you know. So it's sort of assessing the situation practically, politically, and sort of testing the waters. And sometimes when I mentioned that you're meeting with these leaders even before a budget comes out, that can be on your agenda. What do you think about this? Ask. And here, if you can tell they have nothing to do with it, then it's probably not. But if there's any opening, then you just keep that in mind. Okay, there might be an opening here. And then you start talking to your coalition members. Maybe something will move on this. Let's be ready. Let's investigate. Let's start meeting with the other leaders. So it's kind of a process. I'm not any expert, but those are the kinds of things you might do to even assess if it's feasible that calendar year, but
Thanks, Alice. Jerry, did you have a comment about that tax rate question?
Yeah, I was going to just urge everybody to think about the political cycle. So in Fairfax County, we just elected our entire boards of supervisors. We didn't press as hard as I would have hoped for about affordability of housing, but nonetheless, they are elected for 4 years. The year that it is best to ask for a very expansive increase in taxes is the first year of their reelection. As they get closer to their election cycle, their political willfulness to do the good that we need diminishes. So we need to push as hard as we can that first year of reelection to say it's absolutely essential that they fulfill the promise. In Fairfax County, we know that we are missing 46,000 affordable homes in the county. The boards of supervisors in the last couple of years only committed to building 10,000 of those 46. So we've got to push a lot harder, and this is a year for us to do that. Push to them the reality of their own studies by county staff showing the need. And if we don't do it, I don't know who's going to do it for us. So let's put it on our shoulders. Let's have fun doing it. But let's make the argument. You just got reelected. How dare you not want to be bold in meeting the needs? You could build a legacy for your political reign of saying, I solved a problem that's essential for our community.
Thank you, Jerry. Very well said. Very well said. Great. Okay, I think we're going to transition away from our Q&A in the chat. We will have more time for you to ask additional questions, but I'm really appreciative of a lot of our community partners and jurisdictional partners that have their own coalitions or who have their own nonprofit organizations in support of residents who are doing the hard work on the ground and really have a better eye to what's happening in each of the communities. So we're going to go around the region. We're going to go Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William. We've invited these partners to come just speak for a few minutes about what they say in their communities. Some of our budgets have not yet been released yet, so not everybody has an idea of what their ask is at this point. Some of us do. Loudoun is, has out, and we've got to get our public testimony together, to testify next week. So it's a really short window. But, again, just really happy and grateful for our partners. So in Alexandria, really happy, and we work very closely with Tenants and Workers United, and Ingrid Moran is here today to kind of share a little bit about what she's seeing in the city of Alexandria and what they hope, I think, with the budget this year, although it hasn't been released yet in the city. Thank you, Ingrid.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ingrid Moran. I'm the lead community organizer at Tenants and Workers United, and I oversee the work that we do in Alexandria City. And so I think what we're seeing in our community is definitely the impacts we've always seen within our communities of color, and housing is definitely the biggest one. And we saw it even more when the pandemic came through, right? It became more awareness to our local government, right? And so even though, our families were really impacted by the pandemic, and we had received, our communities had received a lot of federal funding, ARPA funding, we're really concerned now because these fundings have ended, and a lot of the funding or are soon to be ending, and it's all connected with housing, right? Because at the end of the day, our families are being burdened by the high cost of rent. There's a lot of lack of tenant protections that, are impacted through what's in the laws that are in our state. And also the low wages that a lot of the families that we work with are through, which is $12 an hour. And so we're definitely seeing the impact even more now, because a lot of the funding is ended. And a lot of that funding was, food security, eviction prevention, and recognizing that I know Navaja had presented a while ago the high numbers of evictions, and particularly Alexandria being one of the highest, right? And so we're seeing enough proactive solutions, but also long-term and short-term in the meantime. How can we preserve and support our families now, but also how can we also think long-term? And so in the city of Alexandria, we're seeing, a lot of development. Things continue to move even during the pandemic, right? Where we're seeing evictions, and we're seeing the city doing a lot of city planning, a lot of zoning changes, a lot of development, the sport arena being one of them. But how can we mitigate, if any development comes to our community, how can we protect and preserve our families? And so I think as an organization, we're thinking short term and long term. And so I think one of them is, we're seeing how can we create vouchers, the locally founded vouchers, where some of the things that, we think that should be needed, because there was assistance, but rent assistance is only like a one-time thing, right? Whereas a voucher, there's subsidized housing, and you're in a way buying down the rents. And so that's something that, the city can do now. And that's something that as an organization, we feel that it's needed in the meantime. In short term as well, we already know in the city of Alexandria, there was a guaranteed income pilot program. And so how can we expand that, something that's already in place? And as well as recognizing that, again, there's a lot of development, a lot of it can benefit of our families. And so how can there be funding for that, those particularly for units that our families can truly afford, which is families that earn the 40% of the AMI and below. And so at the end of the day, we feel that all of this is connected with the well-being of our there's a lot of other issues like education and all these other issues that can be focused at the local level. But at the end of the day, we need a roof over our families, right? Before they can do anything else, right? And so that's something that we're really focused, particularly is on housing, is how do we preserve but stabilize our families, but at the same time, think long term and connecting all the issues, right? And I think, encouraging and telling our council to really think, now that all this funding is ended, that, how can we prioritize long term? And so I think that's one of the that we're trying to focus in Alexandria, even though the budget isn't out, we're still pushing for $10 million for a locally voucher program, $10 million to expand the guaranteed income pilot program called Arise. And how can the city already have funding allocated for pipeline projects that are already approved that will have units at 40% AMI and below. And so how can we mitigate all of this? But one of the questions that will rise up were taxes, right? But at the same time, if not now, when? There's always going to be challenges in any budget, right? And so, we need to see the balances with investments. How are we seeing in, more investments in other places versus housing, social services, things that are really critical, right? Because we're seeing a lot of cuts that are gonna be made, a lot of critical positions through the federal funding. So how are we gonna mitigate that, right? And so that's something that, we're focusing on, Alexandria.
Amazing. Thank you, Ingrid, so much. That was really very comprehensive and well stated. So thank you for all of your advocacy and organization in the city. We really appreciate it. I think you saw Hannah created these amazing flyers for each of the jurisdictions that walk you through your jurisdiction's local budget process. So we'll be sure to send these out too, so you have those dates on, you can put them on your calendars. And make sure you understand when the budget comes out and when is the opportunity to go back and speak. And, we'll be here for you. We're here to answer your questions and help you around messaging and organizing as well. So Ingrid, thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to turn now to Arlington County, and we have Marquand Jackson, who's the Vice President of Resident Services with APA, one of our nonprofit affordable housing developers and providers. So Marquand, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being willing to come and talk tonight about what your residents and what you are seeing the needs are in Arlington County.
Thank you for having me. And so one of the things that I want to say is, and hearing my colleague before me present, Arlington does have a housing grant program. And I was at DHS yesterday, and I want to say that they're currently spending, the budget for that program is upwards of $15 million right now. And so what that does, but it doesn't get to the third, it allows residents to pay up to 40% of their income. And we know that the sweet spot is 30, but we'll take 40 because it's real dollars, right? And so to give an example, at the end of last year, I talked with my staff and I said, anyone who's on the eviction list, the list for eviction, and they're working more than 30 hours and they have children at home or they're elderly, apply for a housing grant for those folks. And the housing grants are accepted on a rolling basis. And so we had quite a few individuals who had been paying $1,500, $1,700 who now are paying $600 and $700, right? So it's really, but to see that in real time happen for folks, it's really impressive to see that, and exciting, right? This is a resource that's available, but for whatever reason, our residents were unaware, right? We as owners be more proactive, my resident services team. And so I oversee APA, and I have a team of 20, right? And they're some of our larger sites. But what I will say is, if you could allow me to share my screen, I wanted to share, this is our 2023 data, and this hasn't been made public to our board yet, so I can't share it out, but I wanted to share with you all, this is our entire portfolio. And if you look over at the end, you'll see that we have about 2,500 units, right? But if you see the number of evictions we had, if you go down evictions total in 2023, we had 50 out of 2,500 units. And part of the reason that we're able to be so successful is, as you can see, if you go down a little further and look over at the full portfolio, we were able to prevent 96% of our eviction filings have been dismissed. But that's because I have a team that was able to put, if you look at the number behind that, we did almost 2,700 rent referrals, more units than we have in our portfolio. And so the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Last year was about $870,000 in eviction prevention dollars, right? And you look at the number of folks who received a housing grant in 2023, it's about 546 households. Almost 20% of our portfolio receives a receives a housing grant, which is buying down their rent, which is really Arlington's tool to buy down their rent. But what I want to draw your attention to is if you look up at the work, income, and assets, you see extremely low income and very low income. If you combine those numbers, 47 and 36, that's the majority of our portfolio is living with the income that is 50% below the median income. And so just to think about that, what this dashboard tells us is we have families who literally cannot afford to live in the units absent, and these are subsidized units, right? These are affordable units, but it's only affordable if you have the resources, right? And so I'll take Gilliam Place, for example. 58 and 41 equals what? 99. 99% of our portfolio of the 173 units live 50% below 50% below the area income. So I share those numbers just to say those are real numbers. And folks, and it's not, we only have one project-based voucher program in our portfolio, and that's in Montgomery County, and so like 90 units. So these individuals have real rents. And so what I will offer you up is that our goal is always to keep people housed. But when people oftentimes have more month than money, it's always going to be a struggle, right? And these numbers, and so what I offer up is that folks are stretching every month to pay rent, even with the subsidy, right? They're still stretching every month to meet that rent. And so there's a few things that we've done to get to 50%. I mean, to get to 50 evictions in our portfolio of 2,500 units, which is less than 3%, less than 2% eviction rate. One of the things we did is for the 80-20 policy last year, where if you came up with 80% of your delinquent balance, we would forgive the 20%. And you could either come up with 80-20 or you could come up with 60%. We put you on a payment plan for the other 20, and then we forgave the 20%. So as owners, we understand that if you can't get an affordable unit, it's really going to be hard in that market rate space. And so what we try to do is we try to be nimble enough to be responsive to the needs, because the data shows us that we have lots of families who really need to be in 30% AMI units, but the deals won't pencil if we have the amount of 30% AMI units that we need. The property won't cash flow, and then we won't be able to maintain the property. So what we're doing on the back end is trying to think about, are there tools and ways that we could unlock resources to buy down rents for folks who are really pinch points. And so the housing grant and other subsidies are really subsidizing the buy down that really we can't afford to do as we're building more developments.
Wow, thank you, Marquand. That's really interesting kind of real-time data. And I know APA does an incredible intentional job of trying to keep your residents housed and using some best practices around eviction prevention. So thank you for that. And I think your comment, it's just we're seeing it across the region, is what happens when people can't afford their affordable housing, right? It's like a real issue with a lack of wage growth and rising rents that people are feeling stuck. So again, I think important messages to carry back to our elected officials who might not be seeing this themselves on the ground, and how additional support for affordable housing and dollars can hopefully impact that. So really appreciate you being with us. We're going to turn to Fairfax County. We have two people who hopefully will speak. We have Jerry Poggi, who is with the NAACP in Fairfax, and Jerry wears many hats. So I know he also is on AHAC and other commissions, and has been doing advocacy in Fairfax for a long time, and happy to have you share what you're seeing, Jerry, and what you'll be hopefully advocating for this
Yeah,
season.
thanks so much. Happy to be here. I'm kind of wearing my advocacy hat, because when you're part of a governmental board, authority, or commission, you're wearing a slightly different hat. So Marquand, I welcomed your, what I couldn't read from a spreadsheet in my poor 73-year-old eyes. I do appreciate all the work that you're putting into and trying to get much more explicit about people living on the edge and how to keep them from falling off. Our chair of our Tenants' Rights Committee, Steve Cherney, is also on this call, and we'd love to follow up with you on how we can get data rich on who is at risk and how to pull them back from the edge. But this is the advantage of having the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance and AHS put together a meeting like this. We're going to cross-fertilize each other. But for NAACP Fairfax, this is a year we're trying to establish kind of a little bit more aggressive push. Fairfax County is ginormous, nearly 1.2 million people. So we have a scale that's a little bit different than some of the other jurisdictions. And our scale of advocacy hasn't yet fully met the challenge of 9 magisterial districts where we really have to push ourselves to be representational in those geographies and to build stronger relationships with the elected officials and to create an advocacy dynamic that gets them to pay attention to what we're arguing needs to be done for the common good. And that's multi-dimensional because we don't have enough young people, although there is a very young person on this call from our group. We don't have enough seniors. We don't have enough people with disabilities or representing families with that to be part of our advocacy team. So consciously this year, we're trying to figure out how do we build capacity and keep that going affirmatively on into the long-term future, such that the narratives that we need to tell to build better budget allocations are always going to get stronger because not only do we have the statistical knowledge of the need, but we have the narratives that will be compelling to win over the larger populace. Fairfax County has a horrific NIMBY problem. So the minute we start to talk about solving what is a broad essential community need, people get worried about whether it's going to diminish their property values or something ridiculous like that. So we know we have to confront that, and we know we have capacity to do it. This is going to be a year of stretching ourselves. NAACP has historically put on a pretty vibrant advocacy platform on one of the boards of supervisors' days of testimony. We know we have to continue to do that, and we're going to do it better this year than we've ever done it. But we really want to push new, younger, and more diverse leadership to help us get the job done better every year. So I won't take up much more of the time other than to say we'd be happy to learn from others. We've been blessed by having a member of the Tenant and Workers' Rights Union, Evelyn's group, be an advisor to us on how to build more momentum. When we went to testify a year ago, we were testifying the same day that it must have been over 100 Tenant and Workers United people turning out to support strengthening the policy supports for people living in mobile homes. That was so monumental. They turned out more people than the SEIU union, who has historically been the biggest turnout group. So we need to learn from that. We need to learn a little bit better on how to brand ourselves to demonstrate political power, voting power. But our hope is that we can get stronger, particularly if Jill and her team and Hannah and Alice help us do regular communications on how to learn from each other on how to get stronger. I feel more optimistic than ever and entered this space 20 years ago trying to help shelter homeless people. And the numbers have grown higher than ever. And so I'm not successful, but I know we could mobilize more, and we need to get people with lived experience to feel a network of support to lend their voices to do what needs to be done. Happy to do that and feel optimistic we can get more done this year than we've ever done before. And it's only the first of many periods of growth for us collectively across the broader geography. So happy to learn from others tonight, and thank Jill and Alice and Hannah for pulling us together.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, I really appreciate your comments, and I agree. I think we have a lot of positive momentum and opportunities to kind of share best practices, resources, and learn from one another. So I'll quickly turn it over to Evelyn with tenants and workers, and really want to echo Jerry's comments about your and your partner Marianella's ability to organize a lot of the residents of the mobile home communities along Route 1 last year. It was amazing testimony, the best I've ever seen, I feel like. So kudos to you, and help us learn how we can do more of it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I will share a little bit about what we see in Fairfax County. We're seeing a lot of issues, especially with just keeping our communities where they are. There is a lot of redevelopment going on, especially in South Fairfax and Route 1 corridor, that have really bring up the rent so high for a lot of the families that live there in the mobile homes. So we work with more than 1,000 families in the mobile home community. They're paying more than $1,000 on rent at this moment. They're getting a lot of bad treatment from the owners of the property. Their homes are not under the code. There is a lot of things that we need to improve when we talk about mobile homes. But two of the issues that concern them the most is that the high rent, the high rent already. We having many corporations coming from outside, from another states, and buying those mobile homes for profit. So as soon as they come in, the rents have gone up to $150 starting this year for some of the communities that we work with, especially the Harmony Place community. So, and then we look at the home needs, right? Like these families own their homes, they have put all their saving in their mobile homes, but yeah, the land is not belong to them. So it's very hard for them to not only pay where they live, the rent for the space, but also all the utilities, but also keep their homes in good shape. So last year we were able to secure some funding for home improvement. And this year they want to go back again and asking for more funding for that, but also not just asking for the funding, but they want this program to be implemented because it have not been able to start yet. Most of the time the county work very slow, and this is one of the projects that is taking them so long to start. But working along Route 1, also we have had the opportunity to work with some of the light tech projects that exist, apartment complex. And we have seen that when we talk about affordable housing, 60% of the median income, this is not affordable for our families, right? So our families already paying $1,500 for one bedroom apartment, plus they has to pay rent. I mean, besides the rent, they has to pay water, sewer, electricity, all of those bills that come with that, including trash. So it be up to $2 of the day. So it's very high. And what we don't see from Fairfax County is being proactive on that issue, right? We want to do development. We want to, make the county growth, but we're not counting on that community that is already there that want to be part of the growth. So right now, our families are more like how we can get the county to implement a program around, a rental voucher program. I know this can be very new for the county, but at this moment, we cannot just think about building new units that we don't know when those units are going to come. But meantime, we're displacing the people that live there, which is the working class people of color. So that's where we are. And we haven't decided, the community has decided how much they're going to be asking for. But that's the two focus that they have this budget process. Our members have been meeting a lot with different officials, supervisors, and talking about the budget and educating them a little bit about the issues. So hopefully when they get there through to the public hearings, is not a news for them because they have already heard our community concerns. So the whole year we were working around that already. So that's where we are.
Amazing. Thank you, Evelyn. Yeah, you really can teach a lot of us how to do this work, I guess, consistently and year round, and all your work really protecting the most vulnerable of our residents, the mobile home Park residents, as you said, own their actual units, but not the ground underneath, and they don't have the protections that renters have, and of course that homeowners have too. So really applaud all your efforts there and everything you do to kind of help us educate us on ways to advocate more strongly. So thank you. We're going to move over to Loudoun County now, and I'd like to introduce Sophia Syed with New Virginia Majority, and who convenes the Loudoun Housing Justice Coalition. So Sophia, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. As Jill mentioned, I'm Sophia. I'm with New Virginia Majority. And for anybody who doesn't know, we're kind of sister organizations with Tenants and Workers United. So we do very similar work, but just in Loudoun County and Western Fairfax. So organizing working class communities of color and organizing tenants in particular to around the housing crisis and the lack of affordable housing, the high cost of housing, the rapidly increasing rents and displacement. And what we've been seeing is similar to what we've already heard in the rest of the region, that there is rents are going up really quickly. Folks are being displaced already. People are moving out far away where the housing is cheaper. And are kind of slowly disintegrating, right? And that's what we want to see. We want to see our communities stay strong and stay together and stay where they, where they live, where they work, and where the kids go to school. And in order to do that, we need to see more programs, more housing programs that are directly and targeted to folks making less than 40% of the area median income. And honestly, at this point, because the area median income has gone up so much, it's probably even like 30% and less and under, because that the income level is the same, but the percentage keeps going down as wealthy folks keep getting wealthier. So what we're going to be in this year's budget, they've already released the draft that the proposed budget. It is a half penny for housing, which is something that we organized and advocated for with the Housing Justice Coalition a couple of years back. The half penny at that is about this year it's about $7.5 million housing, which is not nearly enough. I mean, it's great that it exists. It didn't exist before it, but it's not nearly enough to address the housing needs that exist in the county. And we're seeing that the county is limited in it to incentivize really deeply affordable housing or deeply affordable housing at the scale that's going to make an impact to prevent displacement. And also with it's limiting the county's ability to do serious preservation as existing affordable housing is going to be going to be losing its protections over the next couple of years. There's a few apartment complexes that are going to be aging out of the LIHTC program, and so the county just needs more funds and more housing funds in order to ensure that that we're able to build new housing that's deeply affordable. We're able to preserve those existing affordable housing units. And just similar to in Alexandria, we are going to be advocating for a housing voucher program, because new housing is great. It takes a long time to come on board. People are already having to leave because their rents are going up, because they can't afford their affordable housing units, which are for 60% of the area median income. And so we need something that's going to be a more immediate kind of stopgap measure to help make sure that people can stay in their homes. And we think that a housing voucher program is a county-run housing voucher program would help to achieve that. It's similar to the Arlington Housing Grants Program. So we already have an example, right, from in our nearby jurisdiction. And so we are asking for the board of supervisors to double the current housing investment. So right now in the proposed budget, they're including half a penny for housing, or about $7 million. We're asking them to double that to a full penny for almost $15 million. And we want to see those extra funds go to fund a local county-run housing voucher program for families making less than 40% of the area median income. And we have heard from the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Phyllis Randall, that she is planning to make a motion to double the housing investment. We've gotten a commitment from Mike Turner, one of the supervisors from Ashburn District, saying that he will also support that motion. We're still working on getting commitments from some of the other supervisors, but we are planning to go to the March 2nd public hearing to turn out a bunch of tenants and supporters and allies that day. That's a Saturday at 9 a.m. And Vanessa just questioned about whether Chair Randall's going to be there. She is going to be there. She has another commitment afterwards. But she's going to be there for the budget. And so any folks from here, hope you can come on March 2nd. And we have like a one-click petition, and we're also asking folks to email their supervisors with these, but turning out to speak is really the most powerful action that we can take to show that the residents and voters of Loudoun County really want to see this.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophia. You do really an incredible job of organizing your constituents. So great work, and really just another plea. First up, it's a short window where you don't have much time to analyze the budget, but so it's a great job for all of us and our other partners at the Community Foundation, and even the Loudoun Chambers really stepped up there as well. So just encourage any Loudoun residents to get out and share your testimony. So thank you. Thank you again. Last but not least, we have our speaker from Prince William County, Tenants and Workers, works there as well, so we can ask Evelyn to weigh in again. But I'm happy to introduce Seth Opoku-Yuboa with Wellington Development. Seth is really the driving force between our little local group of advocates that include Navaja and Tenants and Workers and Voice and some other partners. And he's really done a great job shepherding us through the Prince William changes that are really happening before our eyes. So thank you, Seth, for being here tonight.
Yeah. So Prince William County has changed their tone when it comes to affordable housing, and that's tied to the political change on the board and just real life challenges that they're facing in terms of both hiring for local government and other people within the county. So the big thing that we need in Prince William County is just more affordable units, and then more money to target lower AMIs in those new developments, as well as the rental assistance for that population. So in terms of more units, the county hopes to pass an affordable dwelling unit ordinance sometime this year. And what that would do is would incentivize market rate developers to include affordable units within their developments with certain incentives in place, right? You can get a density bonus, certain fees waived, and there would be affordable terms tied to those affordable units, anywhere from 15 to 50 years. The disadvantage that we have in Prince William County is that the part of state code that references our ability to create an affordable dwelling unit ordinance is voluntary. So it won't be a mandatory program the way that you see that in Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, Alexandria, and other parts of Virginia. And then tied to that affordable dwelling unit ordinance, it'll allow the creation for an affordable housing trust fund, which is a financing tool used throughout Northern Virginia and nationally to help with new construction or helping people that need rental assistance. So there was a seed amount of $5 million contributed towards the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then there'll be more contributions in fiscal year 27, 28, 29 to continue on those efforts. So I know that one goal that we have as advocates is to push for more money in this fiscal year and then the following fiscal year to continue building upon what we have there. And kind of like what everyone had said on the call, I do think the need is probably going to be around 30, 40, 50% AMI, just given how that number has gone up, and just anecdotally, just seeing how different populations are doing as it relates to some of the federal programs that were helping during COVID passing by. And just, yeah, I just think there's going to be a lot of need for that population. And that's where our group would be very helpful in communicating how an affordable housing trust fund can be leveraged to target lower AMIs by filling in the gap in the capital stack by providing lower rents for that population. And I'll let Evelyn add in as well.
Thank you so much, Seth. Yeah, Evelyn, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add about Prince William.
No, just to say that it is good that we're working in partnership, because we are in the process of creating that structure, and we want to ensure that that structure really reflects the needs of the community. So it's not just only the money, but also the instruction. So the structure that we need to have in place. So it's good that we're looking ahead on how we want the county to be with the community. So yesterday, I think they unveiled the budget, and some of the members were there. It wasn't just Tuesday. Some of our members were already there. I think it's good for us as an organization to start including our members to send a message to the supervisors. So in that way, we don't get lost in the process.
Well said. Great. Yeah, lots of great work in Prince William, who really didn't use any of their local money to go toward housing programs. It was always using federal dollars. So it's exciting to see the changes happen there, and really thank Evelyn and Seth for all their work along with Voice and our other advocates. So we just have 5 more minutes. I think there's a couple of questions and some comments in the chat. So if anybody else has, I'll just look through it quickly. But if you have a burning question for anyone that you've heard from this evening, if you want to raise your hand, maybe that's an easy way to spend the last 5 minutes. We did talk about Chair Randall being there. Again, I think it's just really important if all of us would commit to doing some sort of season, it would already kind of what we normally have at each of our local jurisdictions, which would just be truly fantastic. You can write letters, you can do video testimony, you can show up in person. A lot of our jurisdictions will allow you to call in as well, which has been really wonderful. I think that was one benefit of COVID is we have many ways to kind of to share our thoughts with our elected leaders. Let me just see, we don't have time to discuss, but reform policies and budgets at the state level. That is so true. So that is something that we do try to track with our partners at the statewide level. A whole other chapter for sure. Exciting things that other jurisdictions, other states are doing around the region. There's a lot of work to be done at the state level. I can't echo that enough. But I want to be respectful of all of your time, and I want to make sure to thank our speakers tonight. So Alice Hogan, thank you again for sharing all of your resources. We will make sure you get that information. Hannah, incredible work with translating and all of the different budget calendars and documents. It's been amazing to see how quickly you work. So thank you. Really appreciate Ingrid Moran and Evelyn Yorita for talking for Tenants and Workers United. I'd like to thank Marquand Jackson from APA for speaking about Arlington County, Jerry Poggi with NAACP in Fairfax, Sophia Syed with New Virginia Majority, and Seth Apoko-Uboa with Wellington Development, and really our kind of Prince William advocacy leader. Grateful for your time. Please let's stay in touch. We'll continue to send out resources, and please help us spread the word for all of our needs. So thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.